Intermittent fasting is a popular means for losing weight, improving metabolic health, and it's catching on not just clinically, but also in research. Well, now there's a new evaluation of meta-analyses using a GRADE, G-R-A-D-E protocol to basically rate the quality of the evidence. And it finds the simple conclusion is that intermittent fasting works. But what exactly is intermittent fasting, according to these studies, and what does it mean to work? These are some of the important details to understand before deciding how you could maybe include intermittent fasting in your healthy weight loss or overall health journey. I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at dietdoctor.com, and the article that came out was published in JAMA, JAMA Network Open, and it's called Intermittent Fasting and Obesity-Related Health Outcomes, an umbrella review of meta-analyses of randomized clinical trials. So as the title says, it's a review of meta-analyses of randomized clinical trials. So interestingly, they're not looking at the specific randomized clinical trials and doing a meta-analysis. They're looking at the meta-analyses that already did that for the randomized controlled trial. So it's a review of meta-analyses. So kind of interesting. And it's good and bad because they're really trying to synthesize all the data together. But when you do that, you sort of lose connection with what the individual studies really were, what they did, what they measured, what the enrollment criteria are. Basically, the quality of the individual studies can get lost when you're reviewing meta-analyses. So that's important. But here's some of the data. They said there were 130 randomized controlled trials, or reports of randomized controlled trials stemming from 45 unique randomized controlled trials. Now, the average sample size of these trials was 38, so it was pretty small, and the average duration was 3 months, which you sort of expect from a randomized controlled trial with a dietary intervention. It's kind of hard to do huge populations for a long period of time. But they identified 4 different types of intermittent fasting. A 0-calorie alternate day fasting, so eating normally one day, eating nothing with calories the next day, eating normally the following day, and trading off. A modified alternate day fasting, where you're allowed to eat up to 500 calories on your fast day. A 5-2, where you eat normal 5 days per week and then fast or eat less than 500 calories 2 days per week. And then time-restricted eating, which, to be fair, they didn't really define. They didn't say, is it 18-6, is it 16-8, is it 14-10? They just said time-restricted eating. And like I said, they used this GRADE criteria to rate the quality of the evidence. And what they found was there were significant improvements in general for intermittent fasting for body mass index, body weight, fat mass, LDL, total cholesterol, triglycerides, glucose, insulin, HOMA-IR, blood pressure. There was also a reduction in fat-free mass when looking at all the data. And that's important because for healthy weight loss, we actually want to maintain our fat-free mass. But there are all these benefits of body mass index and body weight and fat mass and metabolic health parameters, which is key. And that's what people really use, both clinicians and individuals use intermittent fasting for. So it makes sense. The literature supports it. But when they rated the quality of the evidence, they said there was moderate to high quality for only a few different things. And one was modified alternate day fasting, so eating normal one day and then eating less than 500 calories the next day, lasting between 2 and 6 months for decreasing weight compared to chronic caloric restriction. Okay, that's pretty cool because probably easier to maintain than chronic caloric restriction for a lot of people. The second was something similar for no-calorie alternate day fasting, decreased fat mass compared to chronic caloric restriction or a controlled diet. So again, alternate day fasting seems to really help with weight loss with moderate to high quality evidence. A 5-2 diet had moderate to high quality evidence showing it decreased fasting insulin in women compared to chronic energy restriction. And then the last one of moderate to high quality evidence was modified alternate day fasting of 2 to 6 months, decreasing fat-free mass. And so that's obviously a concern. And the other conclusion is that time-restricted eating was not associated with a greater than 5% weight loss by looking at these meta-analyses. Now, this is what's so interesting. It's really a grab bag, right? Still, it's kind of a wild west of what do we mean when we say intermittent fasting? And what do we mean when we say it works? And what are we measuring? And also, are we talking about fasting regardless of the rest of your lifestyle? Or are we talking about fasting as a tool to combine with your lifestyle? Now, I think it's a lot harder to talk about fasting regardless of your lifestyle. Can it work? Sure, because all these trials that we just talked about really did not control for what your lifestyle was, how many calories you were eating, what kind of calories, what kind of food you were eating, what kind of exercise you were doing, how else you were leading a healthy or unhealthy lifestyle. And that's important because, one, you don't want to make up your calories, right? You don't want to purposely calorie restrict one day only to eat twice as much the next day to make up for it. And you don't want to do it if it's going to cause, this urge to binge and eat unhealthy foods, sort of high carb, high sugar, high glycemic index, ultra processed foods. If you're going to eat those on your feeding days, well, maybe you want to address that first before instituting intermittent fasting. So these are not controlled for in these trials. So with that being said, it's pretty impressive that the intervention works regardless, because you could potentially be trying to undo some of the healthy benefits during your eating days. But in these trials that didn't control for that at all, there still was benefit, like I said, for decreasing weight, decreasing fat mass. Now, what about decreasing fat-free mass? Because that's obviously something we don't want to happen. And that's where it's so important just to know how much protein you're eating, how much resistance training you're eating, and how often you're doing the fasting, because those are going to contribute to maintaining your fat-free mass. So this is where I think it's important to look at intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating as a tool to incorporate into your healthy lifestyle, your healthy weight loss routine, which should include relatively low carb nutrition with moderate to high protein, eating mostly whole natural foods and less ultra processed foods, eating a food that helps with satiety so you're not hungry, so you're not overeating calories, and food that you enjoy. Now, using intermittent fasting as a tool to work with that, that's where I think it has its biggest role, and where we likely would see even greater benefits, I would think, from the results of the trials, especially for time-restricted eating, which didn't show significant benefits. And time-restricted eating, to set the bar at 5% weight loss to show significant benefit, it's pretty significant. I mean, a lot of dietary interventions completely revamping people's diets don't show greater than 5% weight loss in clinical trials. So to expect just a slight change of timing, I think is a pretty high bar. But there are definitely trials that show simple time-restricted eating help you reduce weight and improve metabolic health. And then there are others that are a little bit more controversial. But again, I think it comes down to what are you doing with the rest of your day and the rest of your lifestyle. And then, of course, the other part about all this, and there's no outcome data, right? So it doesn't mean people have fewer heart attacks or fewer strokes or fewer diabetes-related complications. We just don't have that data. It's not that it proves it doesn't. That data just simply doesn't exist. But this is what we have, and it's a good starting point. So again, the conclusion is intermittent fasting works to help lose weight, to help reduce BMI and improve metabolic health. But what exact type of intermittent fasting? There's still so many definitions, so many different ways you can use intermittent fasting. I think we really should see it as a tool to use with our overall healthy nutrition, healthy lifestyles, making time-restricted eating of 14 hours to 16 hours sort of the norm rather than an intervention for time-restricted eating. That would be, I think, a helpful approach for a lot of people, certainly 12 hours. And the healthier you're eating, the easier that's going to become. And then if you wanted to institute alternate day fasting, either a modified or a 0-calorie, these data seem to suggest that could be beneficial. But of course, always check with your healthcare provider first, especially if you're taking any medications for blood sugar or blood pressure or have other chronic medical conditions, because not eating can interfere with the way your body absorbs certain medications or how you regulate your blood sugar, your blood pressure, etc. All right, so hope this was helpful. Again, this was about intermittent fasting and obesity-related health outcomes, an umbrella review of meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials. And of course, we have plenty of other resources available at dietdoctor.com about intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next time here on Diet Doctor News on YouTube.